Hi, and welcome to the Debrief. I'm Donna King, Editor-in-Chief of Carolina Journal, and joining us this week, of course, Mitch Kokai, Senior Political Analyst for the John Locke Foundation, and Bob Lupke, our resident education expert on education policy for the John Locke Foundation. All right, we've got a big one this week. We're talking about the latest Carolina Journal poll. It's all about education. If you've had kids at home through these icy days, you're thinking about education, what all those teachers are doing for us, and what we really need to be talking about in education policy going forward. One of the things that we found in this poll, you can find it on carolinajournal.com, and of course on the John Locke site, johnlocke.org, for the details if you want to look at the crosstabs and some of those real things. One of the things that really jumped out at me, Bob, I'm going to start with you. What do you think of this? The voter dissatisfaction. It was question one right there at the top. Voter dissatisfaction with their local schools was much higher than I expected. 47% of people were not happy with their local schools.
Yeah, that's true, Donna. Actually, if you look at that, we had two questions there.
Okay.
We had a dissatisfaction question for the local schools and also one for statewide.
Right.
And you're right. The dissatisfaction numbers were quite high. I think the differential locally was about 12%. In other words, I think it was 12% more greater
Right.
dissatisfaction than satisfaction. And that's actually, in fairness, a little down from last year when the number was actually higher, but still the net result is people are dissatisfied with education. That's what's driving, a lot of people to school choice programs. That's also contributing, as we'll talk about later, why school choice programs are popular. But the dissatisfaction numbers you talk about are real. I think it's some of the residue of COVID.
Okay.
It's some of the realization that people like choice.
Yep.
They like options, and I think those numbers will probably stabilize for a while.
Sure. What do you think?
Bob alluded to this, but it's interesting that this year we changed the question a little bit because this is a question we've asked from year to year. But when we've asked it in the past, we've asked, what is your satisfaction with local schools in North Carolina or local schools in the state? And I think it was Bob's idea this time around. Let's make it two questions to make it clear that we're going to ask first about your local schools, the schools in your community, in your district, and then also ask about schools in North Carolina as a separate question. So last year when we asked this question, and it was basically just quality of education in the schools, it was 33% satisfaction, 55% dissatisfaction. So when we added the word your to make it clear that it was your local schools, the satisfaction ticked up just a little bit to 35%. Dissatisfaction went down to 47%. That's still not great news, but it's a little bit of an improvement. And it's probably, at least to some extent, because people have a better feeling about their own local school district, right, than they do about the schools statewide. I've talked about this with Bob, and he's talking about it as the congressional effect. Yeah. You don't like Congress, but you like your own congressman. Another thing that's interesting here on the satisfaction is there is definitely a partisan bent to this as well. Among Republicans, only 25% satisfaction. Among Democrats, 47% satisfaction. We didn't poll if you were a parent of a school-age kid or not. We didn't ask that. But through another question, you can extrapolate that there are 60% of the people in our survey who don't have a child in the public schools right now.
Sure.
Among those 60%, the satisfaction level with your local schools was only 28%.
Interesting.
So that tells me that people who don't have the kids in the schools aren't that satisfied. It also tells you that if the overall satisfaction rate is 35%, and the 60% of your polling audience that doesn't have kids had a satisfaction rate of 28%, that the satisfaction rate among parents is actually higher. Now, you'd have to do you have to do some sort of algebraic equation to get what it is. But my guess is the satisfaction rate among parents is probably closer to 40%. And with all of the non-parents being dissatisfied, it brings it down to 35%. I think we could jump probably to that next question where you asked about the statewide schools, and the overall number drops from 35% to 29%
Right,
satisfaction, while the dissatisfaction jumps up from 47% to 53%. And if you look at the partisan groups and also at well, if you look at the partisan groups, it's interesting in that Republicans dropped by about 3 points. Democrats and independents dropped by about 7 points.
Yeah.
So when you go from your local district, the one
Right.
you know and care about, to schools statewide, you see a definite drop, which is exactly the effect that I think Bob expected when he thought we should ask the question.
Yeah, and if you actually look at the numbers, the differential on the statewide question is twice. It's 24.
Yes, they're not good numbers.
Than
A
what
candidate would lose a race
the
in
local
this.
the local differential is. So
Sure.
The congressional effect is there.
Right.
So and it's strong.
Yeah.
It's strong.
In one of our other questions, the plurality of voters gave their local school board a C. So this is not just, the boots on the ground, the folks who are actually in the classroom. This is a management problem, it sounds like. One of the things they said was that support for electing a state board of education, and I imagine this would probably extend since local boards are getting a C, is strong across parties. Why do you think the voters seem to want more direct accountability? That's what it indicates that this poll might be saying. What do you
Well,
think?
remember that question is because of the way that our state board of elections is set up now, it's almost all appointed by the governor.
Sure.
You've got the lieutenant governor, you've got the treasurer is on there, and then everyone else is appointed by the governor.
Except state superintendent.
State superintendent also,
Right.
who's on. So you have those folks, and then the question set that out, saying, here are the people who are on the state board now.
Right.
Do you think we should elect the state board? And so there's support for that because people like to elect officials. They're not as
Right.
much in support of appointments, although there's also an interesting partisan effect there too. Since we currently have a Democratic governor, Democrats were less inclined to support electing all the state school board members, but Republicans were very much in favor.
Yeah,
of
but then the numbers, as you said, were still strong across the board, and I think it's because of what Mitch said. That
Right.
When given a chance, people like to vote on things,
Sure.
especially as something as personal as education.
Yeah, what do you think lawmakers can take away from that number?
I think they ought to look at it seriously. Now,
Okay.
legislation was, I think, introduced last year by Representative Blackwell
Okay.
on that, and whether that comes back, I mean, the polling numbers, I'm sure, will come across his desk.
Sure, there is a public appetite for electing the state board of elections.
State
Board of Education.
Yeah. And the other thing too, and Bob knows this from following this year in and year out, is that even though all of those members are appointed by the governor, it's not as if a new governor comes in and appoints the whole board. They are
Right.
staggered terms. So I'm not sure if this is true, but I think it's possible that you could go through a whole 4-year term as governor and never get a majority on that board of the people who you would want there. So
Yeah.
people might elect you as the education governor and want you to do all kinds of great things, but because of the way those board appointments are stacked up, you might not, in the course of a term, get that board totally on board with your ideas.
That's a good point, Mitch. And also, there's 2 points that you can be appointed, but then also you have to be voted on. And that's
Right.
where some of the foot dragging has taken place, too. So it can be a little discombobulated.
Sure. And those school boards are important because, in many cases, they're helping draw those district lines for schools. And one of our other questions in this, question 3, if you're following along and looking there at our crosstabs and our results, is 70% of voters say parents, not school boards, should decide where a child attends school. Why do you think that is so dominant across, age groups and party lines? Why is that such an important thing? Because for years, we've had school boards deciding where you go to school based on your address.
This is a question we poll on pretty much annually. And since I've been here, the responses have stayed in the high 60s, low 70s
Wow.
consistently.
So it's always been popular.
Yes, and I think it's popular because I think it's baked into our DNA.
Right.
We think parents are the best
Sure.
people because I think we all instinctively
They know their
that.
children the most,
They know
yeah.
that, yes. And so that's high. You can go across all categories. Those numbers are exceptionally high by region, by party registration, by income. They're high
Right.
across the board, and I think that's something people instinctively know.
Sure.
There is a bit of a partisan split, though.
Okay.
Bob's right that every party group favors having the parents be most involved,
Right.
but it's most popular among Republicans.
You're right.
So overall, we asked who's best suited, and we gave the options of parents and guardians, or the local school board, the state board, or the U.S. Department of Education.
Right.
Thankfully, although I don't want to meet these 2.4%, only 2.4% of people think the U.S. Department of Education
can't
should
imagine.
decide where your kids go to school. But 68% said parents or guardians, 18% said the local school board, 5% said the state board. If you break it down by party, among Republicans, it was 85% parents and only 9% local school board. Among Democrats, still strong among parents, but 55%, and 26% of them said it should be the local school board. So they are more inclined to think that the school board should have, the local school board should have the say. Numbers for state board and the U.S. Board of Education pretty low across the board. Among independents, it was pretty close to what the overall number was, 67% parents, 18% local school board.
Yeah, the difference is worth noting, but still with underscoring, the numbers are still very high in favor of it.
Well, also still very high, the support for Opportunity Scholarship. Question for the very next one. The Opportunity Scholarship program support really remains strong in this among, if you look at those crosstabs among lower income, among non-college educated voters. What does this tell us? There's been a lot of narrative about this is so that millionaires can get money to send their kids to private school. Millionaires are sending their kids to private school anyway. They've always had school choice.
Yeah.
What does this number, when you really look at those crosstabs, tell us about who this is serving?
I think people like choice.
Yeah, it goes back to the same thing.
It's not anything that's, really complicated.
Right.
I think people like the program. If you look at some of the crosstabs of people that, that are, if you look at people that have been in the program,
Right.
it's a lifesaver for many people, and they feel strongly about it. And I think some of that information is getting out. Plus, the numbers are such that now there's 104,000 people in the program. So that's going to get out also. And there is a little bit, it's been in the news, and I think people are becoming more familiar with it, and they're looking at it as an option. And I think it's been around since, 2014.
Right.
So about a good 12 years.
A decade, a generation of parents, really.
Yeah.
of
So I think
course.
a lot of those things feed into it.
Anything surprising for you in that?
Not necessarily surprising, but worth noting to me is this is one where the racial breakdown is interesting. So
that's
64% overall support for the Opportunity Scholarships. Support is 62% among whites, 72% among blacks.
Oh, interesting.
And I think it's because black parents who have looked at education and looked at the schools that sometimes their kids have been stuck in have said, hey, this is a way for us to get the education our kids need that will help them better their lives, better than the school districts that they've been stuck in because of the zip code.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, I think that's why the Opportunity Scholarship Program started in the first place, I think, is so that those underserved communities could get a chance at private school. Charter schools also still have a lot of support, but we're seeing in this particular poll, it's dipping a little bit for charter schools. Since 2023, we've asked it the last few years. What's behind that erosion of support, do you think?
Yeah, it's down, I think, about 11%
Yeah.
since 2023.
Right.
And if Mitch, you've gone into the crosstabs more than I have, but I think that some of the slippage is from Democrats
It definitely is.
and
Okay.
also independents.
Interesting.
If you look at the differential on Republicans, I think Republicans this overwhelmingly favor. But the slippage has been in the last few years from Democrats. Now, if you remember, even for a few years back, President Obama really boosted charters because he came out and tried to do a number of positive things towards charters. And I think it tipped the sentiment of many Democrats. Some of that might be wearing off now.
Okay.
So there has been some slippage amongst Democrats, and I think some of that is reflected in the numbers.
Very
Yeah,
interesting.
and the details are, Bob mentioned this, but the details are, so overall charter school support right now, according to this poll, 57% with 33% opposition. That is down. Back in 2023, it was 69% support, 22% opposition. So if you were a political candidate, you'd still be happy with a 24-point win.
Sure.
But seeing that number go down has to be at least some source of concern. And Bob was exactly right that if you do the party breakdown among Republicans, there's still 73% support for charter schools, only 16% opposition. But now among Democrats, it's basically a 50-50 proposition.
Interesting.
45% support, 45% against. Among independents, closer to where things stand overall statewide. 57% support, 38% opposition. And I'll also do the racial breakdown on this one just because there is a contrast to what we saw in the Opportunity Scholarships.
Sure.
Black voters more likely than white voters to support Opportunity Scholarships. But on charter schools, it's the other way around. You have 54% support among whites. Actually, no, yes. So only 51% support among the black voters. It's 64%, I think it is, among the white voters of the charter schools. So while the black voters are more likely to support the Opportunity Scholarships than white voters, whites are more supportive of charter schools than black voters.
It's so interesting to me because I have seen a shift in charter schools. It seems to be that they're becoming more like public schools.
Well, they are public schools, and I think
they are public schools for sure.
And I didn't mean to.
No, you didn't cut me off at all. Well, and that's. Do you think it's a rejection of the charter schools used to be seen as sort of the alternative version, but now that you have Opportunity Scholarships, now that you have remote learning, micro schools, all of these other things, people have more choices. Charter isn't as appealing. It's not the.
I think they're somewhat a victim of their success.
Okay.
And also, as they've grown, the steady drumbeat of the opposition saying that they take money from existing public schools, has picked up. So that drumbeat's always going to be part of the narrative. I think it's gotten more so in urban areas, which we all know, and so I think the pushback, some of that sticks in the public's minds.
Yeah, but they're tremendously popular.
They are popular, and there's over 200 of them. There's about 150,000 kids. Actually, 120,000.
Wow.
In charter schools, and they're growing, but also there's still a fair amount of people that are confused about their identity. As I said, they are public schools.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, we polled on that a couple of years back, Mitch. A fair amount of
people didn't know that.
Didn't know that.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's
I think
interesting.
I think that's still.
And they don't get the same level of funding. They don't get funding for capital.
Well, they are entitled to the same level of per pupil funding as the public schools within that district.
Okay.
But not for capital.
Not for
But
capital.
not for capital.
Playgrounds,
Now that
buildings,
differential,
lands,
there's a differential. It amounts to almost 25-30% less.
Interesting.
Because of how funding goes through, and also you're right, there is no capital funding, which is significant.
Right.
Yeah, a couple more notes. First, to offer a correction, I couldn't read my own chicken scratch. Among whites, the support for charter schools is 59%, and among blacks, 51%. So still more support among whites than blacks. The other thing, you referenced this a little bit in the question, and I think there is some truth to the fact that charter schools are no longer the bright, shiny object of school choice.
Right.
For a while in North Carolina, that was the option.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted something that wasn't the traditional district school, charter school was the option unless you could afford a private school and not get any sort of state funding for it. So that was it. But now, because of Opportunity Scholarships, because of ESAs, because of homeschooling, the growth in homeschooling, I think charter schools are seen as kind of more part of the establishment, even if they still are innovative and do things differently than the traditional district schools.
Sure. We had another question about facilities. Question 11, if you're following along at home, 46.9% of people would support the state government providing money to charter schools to help obtain land and buildings. 47% would oppose. So almost an even split.
Yeah, it is pretty much
Sure.
a wash.
Right.
Considering, well within the margin of error. So, yeah, that's a very tight question.
Yeah,
there.
it is.
And I think last year we asked a question on whether or not counties should be allowed to provide money for capital costs if they choose to, and I think that was approved.
Right.
I think if I remember the numbers, I think the numbers were people favored it.
Right.
Now this, I think it reflects
Sure.
obviously existing opinion on it, and
They're
I
not
think
going
it's-
anywhere. Yeah.
I think it's pretty much, if you look at the straight, it's a political divide on
It
this.
100% is.
Yeah.
The only reason that it's even is because of overwhelming support among Republicans.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you mentioned basically 47% for and against.
Yeah.
Among Republicans, 60%
Wow.
support. Only 34% opposition. Among Democrats, 56% opposition, only 38% support. And among independents, 54% opposition, 42% support. So if Republicans weren't so far in favor of this, you would see it as a much lower number in terms of support. But because Republicans like this
Very
idea
supportive.
so much, overall it's about an even split.
Very interesting. While we're on this, let's talk a little bit about Governor Stein's veto of the tax credit scholarship, federal tax credit scholarship program. This is something we've been watching very closely at the John Locke Foundation and at Carolina Journal. Governor Stein vetoed North Carolina opting into a federal school choice tax credit scholarship program. That has been kind of on the calendar, on and off, for a veto override. So
It's on for February 9th.
Yes.
Is the next time.
so February 9th, and they keep bumping it left.
It'll
so.
only happen when they have
Something
enough
right.
people show up that they can do
Exactly,
it.
exactly.
If they
So-
decide not to come back for a session, it will be bumped again.
So they likely have the votes for it, I imagine. So question 23, we talked about what does the average voter think of the idea of overriding that vote? What did we find?
We
Well,
found. Go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah.
So 36% supported the veto.
Right.
41% opposed it.
Interesting.
So more thought that this should go forward rather than the veto. So 41% were against Stein, 36% were for Stein, 22% unsure. And once again, once you throw in a politician's name, you're definitely going to see the partisan split.
Sure.
Because among Democrats, 57% supported Stein's veto, 20% opposed it. Among Republicans, 14% supported the veto, 66% opposed it. Among independents, a much closer number, 42% opposed the veto, so supported the measure, 38% supported the veto, so supported Stein. So definitely this came down to, once people saw Stein's name, they said, oh, I'm a Democrat, I better support him, or I'm a Republican, I better be against it. And if you looked at people who didn't care one way or another, they were more likely to oppose the veto and support the program.
Sure. Does that indicate to lawmakers that they've got some, tailwinds for?
Yeah, I
overriding
also
veto?
hope that Governor Stein looks at this a little. Now, he did give a forceful veto statement last August when this was passed. He did say, and I've looked at it, read it several times.
Sure.
He likes school choice. But he also, his opposition was that he didn't feel the program helped public schools.
Okay.
He thought it took away tax dollars, et cetera. And he also said a sentence in the veto statement that can be interpreted as a little wiggle room, that if the regulations are such that you can help public schools, he's open to reviewing it again. So I'm hopeful on that.
Good.
He has said the same thing a couple times since then off the record, that there is some wiggle room. And this is our contention from people on our side, that I don't want to get into all the tax credit issues and so forth, but the program can be configured to help public school students.
Interesting.
I mean, the money going to a scholarship granting organization. SGOs can be developed for anything, including helping public school children.
Interesting.
So that's our optimism, that
Okay.
we can show him that we can help all kids, public and private.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's move to this. The plurality of voters aren't sure how we're spending our money, and I think that is really interesting. I mean, we've got
It's
how
also
are we spending our money, right?
It's also dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous. So, yeah, plurality of voters. I'm looking at questions 9 and 10, if you're looking there. A plurality of voters aren't sure how much is spent per pupil, yet most of them believe it's too little. So I don't know how much it is, but it's not enough. I think that says a lot about the results more than the amount of money.
It also tells
yeah.
you a lot about the fact that people don't have any point of comparison.
Right.
I mean, we ask people, first of all, how much do you think is being spent? And about 12 per pupil on students in North Carolina, taking everything together, 12% of people voted or said less than $5,000 per student.
Right.
22% said $5,000 to $10,000. 20% said $10,000 to $15,000, which is the correct number. 13% said more than $15,000, and a third, 33%, were unsure. If you break it down,
That's a ton, yeah, unsure.
If you break it down by party, Republicans were more likely to say that we spend more than we do. Democrats and independents were more likely to say that we spend less than we do.
Right.
Then the follow-up question, we gave them the number, said it was $13,100 or thereabouts, and then asked, well, is that too much, too little, or just about right? And the number was 16% said too much, 43% said too little, 15% said appropriate, 26% said unsure. Once again, very interesting partisan splits here. 25% of Republicans, too much. Only 6% of Democrats said too much. 26% of Republicans said too little. 55% of Democrats said too little. Among independents, 21% too much. 44% too little. To me, I think that argument for people in jobs like Bob's and his colleague Caitlin Shepard is getting out more information about what's the number that's the bang for the buck. Because my guess is people see that, they think, well, the schools aren't doing very well, so we need to spend more.
Right.
Yeah.
And if they knew that in other places, in other countries, you could get really good results for a much lower cost, then maybe they'd be less inclined to think that way.
Isn't this the single largest chunk of our state budget
it's
education?
definitely.
It's
and people don't know where it's going.
K-12 education is $18.1 billion.
But we just don't know where it's going, and the results aren't speaking for themselves.
Actually,
or maybe they
let
are.
me throw in here something that I think is relevant. Our per pupil spending, I think in 25, was $13,100 referred to in the poll. We rounded a little bit there, but the actual average tuition at a North Carolina private school was about that exact same amount in the same year. So the difference there, and I know people think private schools are very expensive. They aren't. And I think we also, I mean, as Mitch said, the real issue in most people's minds is, what do you get for that?
Right.
Right.
How much do you get for it? And I think people are voting with their feet if given the chance.
Sure. Yeah. Before we wrap it up, I want to talk a little about COVID spending. This was a couple of questions here in this poll. If you look at question 19, most voters say COVID had a major negative impact on students, and many think the recovery funds were spent poorly. You know, this is an interesting question because I feel like this is another case where we hear about all this money that the federal government spent during COVID to help students recover from being at home for a year and a half. But nobody knows where it went, and was it spent well? I mean, what lessons do we have from this?
Well, two very important questions here. And the first one, I'm going to take credit for the first one because I thought everyone knew COVID had a negative impact.
Sure.
But I wondered, how much do people think that the shutdowns from 20 and 21 have an impact on student achievement today? And the answer is they think a lot. 83% of people think that the COVID shutdowns from 2020 and 2021 have a negative impact on student achievement in North Carolina today. 83%. Only 5% said a minimal impact. And 1.6% think maybe a positive impact for some people.
For some people.
Yeah, I want to know. I could sell them some nice farmland in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So that was a part. But then the second one, and this I believe was Bob's question that he wanted to ask. Okay, so we got the $6 billion or whatever for $6.2 billion for COVID from the federal government. And then we gave people in the question a little bit of a breakdown of how much it was spent and asked them, well, do you think it was spent appropriately or not? And 45% of people said it was spent poorly, 20% said it was spent well, 13% said neither, 22% unsure. So people looked at those numbers just based on what they saw in the poll question.
Sure.
And probably what they know, especially if they're parents, and they see what happened in the schools and think, no, this wasn't spent well.
Right, right.
Yeah, I've harped on this for years.
5 now, 6?
And how the money was misspent. And often what I want to interject here is we put down the percentages because every school district is required to fill out a form directing them what they're spending stuff on. And if you go through that, you can figure out, what it's spent on, but also what it's not spent on. And the designation for tutoring and tutoring expenses, which there's been a consensus in the research for the last 5 years, it's the best way to remedy learning loss. That total was less than 2%.
That is
all
so
expenditures. So the point is, in my view, it's not the money, it's how it's spent. In this particular case, it's how it's spent is just as important as how much.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you check out carolinajournal.com and johnlocke.org for all the details on this poll, and let us know what you think. Reach out to editor at Carolina Journal. Please let us know what you think and comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Thanks so much.